Hey everyone, my name is Matt Stalford and this is The Bully Pulpit. We've been away for a little bit, but we're excited to be back with episodes, podcasts, and more. This month, we'll be covering our first international topic, the rise of China. Now, China is already a major player on the world stage, but in recent years, the country has taken steps to strengthen its economic and political standing at home and abroad. Today, we're going to discuss these moves and analyze their impact on the current world order. First, we'll give a brief overview of modern Chinese history, so we can better understand the country as it exists in the present. Then, we'll discuss China today and how the country has changed under the leadership of Xi Jinping. We'll finish by looking forward and examining how Xi's reforms will shape China in the years to come. So with that in mind, let's begin by looking at two events which shaped modern Chinese history, starting with the defeat of the Qing dynasty at the hands of the British in what's now called the First Opium War. Initially, British trade in China was restricted to a single port in Canton. Here, the British would exchange silver for a variety of Chinese goods, which led to a large trade imbalance in China's favor. Now, to counter this imbalance, the British began selling opium to independent merchants in India, who would then sell it in China right outside of Canton. This opium exchange reversed the trade imbalance in favor of the British, but led to a growing number of addicts inside China's borders and drained the Chinese economy of silver. So in response, the Chinese Daoguang Emperor directed Viceroy Lin Zexu to fix the problem and ban the trade of opium. Lin then seized over 20,000 chests of opium in Canton without offering compensation to the British, who took this as an act of war. The British dispatched a small force to China and, using their technological and tactical superiority, inflicted a series of crushing defeats upon the Chinese Empire. The emperor was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking, the first in a series of what the Chinese would later call the unequal treaties. This began the period known as the Century of Humiliation, in which the Chinese Empire suffered numerous defeats and eventually crumbled due to aggressive actions by technologically superior European powers, and later, Imperial Japan. This was an inward-seeking time of Chinese history, where many of the nation's top scholars would ask how the country could adopt the technology of Europe while remaining fundamentally Chinese in culture. Our next major event, the liberal reforms under Deng Xiaoping, was in many ways an answer to this question. Deng Xiaoping was Mao Zedong's successor as chairman of the Communist Party and instituted a series of economic reforms called socialism with Chinese characteristics. These reforms sought to combine socialist ideology with a pragmatic market economy. For example, under these reforms, peasants were allowed to earn extra income by selling their excess grain on the open market, and local communities would decide for themselves which crops to grow. These policies caused the country's agricultural output to skyrocket, leading to a population boom that furthered China's industrial capacity. At the same time, Deng opened the country to foreign trade and used the power of the state to shift the country's economy toward an export-focused model. Tariffs were decreased by over 40%, and foreign direct investment from Western countries poured in. Gradually, private corporations began to compose a larger amount of the country's industry. By 2005, the state's share of industrial output had fallen from 81% to 15%. This further sped China's already rapid industrialization, and over the same period, trade increased from under 10% of GDP to over 64%. This surging economic growth has given China a path toward parity with the West. The steps taken by the country's leaders today will determine the balance of power in the future. Most people, particularly in the West, regard China's ambitions for international leadership as indicative of a rising power seeking to assert itself in a Western-oriented world. Former President Hu Jintao coined the term China's peaceful rise, which was a foreign policy approach emphasizing the use of soft power in international relations and cooperative coexistence with the Western world. As the largest developing country and the second largest economy in the world, China under Hu signaled its desire for a multipolar world order rather than hegemony, keeping China open to trade and calling for less assertiveness in border disputes with its immediate neighbors. Overall, Hu's tenure was substantially more liberal than his predecessors, but that changed when he was succeeded by Xi Jinping. On November 15, 2012, during the 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping assumed power as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, President of the People's Republic of China, and Chairman of the Central Military Commission, holding substantial sway over the newly reshuffled Politburo Standing Committee. Ever since his rise to power, Xi has embarked on a political agenda of systematically dismantling his predecessor's policies of peaceful rise. By capitalizing on China's rapid development and political ascendancy, Xi aims not only to attain recognition as a superpower, but also to gradually upend the current geopolitical system and supplant it with a Sinocentric world order. Domestically, Xi has pursued an assertive and authoritarian political agenda that calls back to the days of Mao Zedong. One of his main initiatives has been an anti-corruption campaign, which, though successful in ousting a number of corrupt party officials, has also been used to tighten restrictions on Chinese civil society, including repression of political dissidents, human rights advocates, and minority religious communities. Further, the Communist Party has increased its restrictions on the press, causing the Free Press Advocacy Group, Reporters Without Borders, to rank China 176th out of 180 countries in its 2017 World Press Freedom Index. Certain websites and social media companies like Wikipedia, Twitter, and YouTube, along with news websites like the New York Times, are fully blocked. Historical events that reflect negatively on the government, like the Tiananmen Square massacre or Hong Kong's Umbrella Movement protests, are either completely cut out from textbooks or portrayed in a light favorable to the party. But what has particularly alarmed international observers are Xi's policies that aim to stoke Chinese nationalism at the expense of minority rights. He has pursued a program of Sinicization in remote regions like Tibet, encouraging a massive influx of Han Chinese businesses into the region and gradually marginalizing the non-Chinese minorities in the area. Xi has also intensified Han Chinese nationalism around issues of sovereignty and solidarity, while distracting people's attention from domestic problems like increased political repression and slowed economic growth. Taken all together, China under Xi Jinping has been successfully making moves to shore up its strength at home and project its power abroad. Looking forward, China's future will be tied to Xi Jinping, who has become the country's most powerful leader since Mao. His consolidation of power will create a party more loyal to himself with a much firmer hand in foreign affairs. Xi has implemented the One Belt, One Road initiative, which seeks to fund hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure projects throughout Central Asia and Eastern Europe. It has been called the New Silk Road and, if successful, would rival the transatlantic trade dominated by the Western world. After accepting Chinese aid, countries who are part of the One Belt, One Road initiative often begin to align their foreign policy stances with those of China. This is a strategy China will continue to use in the future, and it shows the power China is seeking to attain internationally. Domestically, with a large middle class, slowed economic growth, and increasing debt, China risks social tension in the years to come. To prevent this, the military has been reformed. The People's Liberation Army cut 300,000 troops and reorganized the remaining units into smaller and more tactically capable groups. Military headquarters, which oversees the majority of military operations, has had much of its power delegated to the party watchdog, the Central Military Commission, which Xi Jinping heads. This tying of the military to the party gives Xi Jinping more personal control over the institutions of power. And it's likely that he'll use that control to further consolidate China's position in the world and his own position at home. Under Xi's watch, the Chinese Communist Party has become the preeminent rising power on the global stage, and now we must wait and see how long that will continue. So this has been the Bully Pulpit. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month.